developing civic skills through participation in public debates is derived from our research projects. Previous one was called OpenEUDebate, which ran until last year. OpenEUDebate aimed to mediate between citizens and experts on EU policymaking and knowledge, research, and all of these issues related to the theme of politics and expertise. And our current research project, Reclaiming Liberal Democracy in the Post-Factual Age, it aims at understanding especially the post-truth politics. So issues such as disinformation, complex phenomenon of discreditation of science, problems with populism, and all of these kind of very complex webs of challenging our democracy. So our common research tries to understand what kind of citizens are required by our current democracy, because currently we see a lot of challenges with this post-truth, these kind of alternative facts, and really this kind of erosion of our democratic way of living. And so what we try to do in our research has to do with engaging with these real problems that occur for citizens in democracy. So let's start with the next slide, and I will briefly show the summary of the takeaways of this webinar. So these are just a brief list of what we try to pass on with this presentation. And I think the key here is to really focus on the role of the citizens in a democracy, especially in these times of disinformation tactics. And we especially focus on the electoral disinformation and go into the activity, try to show with an empirical case how this can have a real effect on the citizens and how we can tackle these problems by understanding the role that citizens play in this bigger issue of deliberation and pluralism in public debates. So next slide, please. So our webinar today is split into two parts. So the first part, we will talk about the theoretical background of why we should have more focus on citizen participation in public debates. Why is it important? So that how these civic skills for participation can be developed without just the focus on elections as such or through formal courses or teaching, but we should integrate this kind of idea of involving people in public debates, public discussions, because it's important for our democracies to engage, to be active. So what we are going to do is to have a holistic or this kind of broader understanding of civic education being part of democracy as key element of what we are trying to achieve with protecting our democratic institutions, but also our democratic systems. So the second part, we will give a little bit more practical advice, what kind of things we can encourage people to do, to activate them, to get them involved. So we provide this case of EU regulation on fighting electoral disinformation because it's a recent issue, and there's going to be electoral campaigns. They are already starting. So this is a present challenge for citizens, and these can have an impact on how our democracies are going to be working in the future as well. So there is a lot at stake with this challenge of disinformation. Okay, so next slide, please. So now I give the floor to my colleague Elena, who is going to be talking about the academic, going into the deeper into the academic discussion and give us some insights into democratic deliberation. Elena, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. What we want to do with this activity is to connect, as Taru has explained, what we are doing in our research, but also with more long concerns about civic education. What we find in the literature, you can see it in, for example, the topics of the European research projects, etc., is that, each years they change the concerns, and all the academics we run after these topics to try to really be useful, but also to give our insights on some topics that are related to what is happening. So in our research, in the horizon, we are very concerned to what has been explained as the post-truth context, post-truth condition, the post-truth era. After we will develop a little bit this concept because it refers to many things that are happening. But what happened also is that very quickly we start to have developed civic courses on something, on misinformation, or just to acquire digital tools for the future, or to fight or to try to couple with this innovation as the artificial intelligence, etc. What we want to insist on, and this is a point we want to develop in this activity that, is very short, but I think it gives us some time to really emphasize that always behind all of this, there are some views of how democracies work, what are the relations between, ordinary citizens and the institutions, but also what is happening in what we call the public sphere, what we call in civil society. There are many things going on, and the way we envisage this has, influenced the type of courses or the guidelines that we are establishing to face this challenge, because we are facing really some structural challenge in our democracies. I hate also because maybe I have a young daughter. I hate to start these courses with these negative views, that all the big crisis of democracies and these things. I think we really are in a moment where we need to reflect on how we have been doing things, which types of regulations of our institutions, the functioning of democracy has been developed in the last decades. But at the same time, what is important is to have a general view of democracy that shows how resilient are democratic systems also. We need always to be adapting to the new context, to the new challenges, but at the same time, that we have a lot of instruments, very good instruments, very adaptable. They have shown their effectivity for decades in different contexts, in different historical periods. And this is something that I think can help us just to face the new challenges, but with we need some time to reflect on what we are doing, on what we are deciding, and what we are, especially being academics, what we are recommending. So I can say, and I'm going to summarize a lot, but we can through questions we can go back to these general points. In the last decades, I will say until I don't know, maybe 2017, something like this. There was a period where we were really insisting, especially when developing these programs on civic education, on participation, but a view of participation that was really focused on trying to engage ordinary citizens on, policy making in the sense. So it has been very popular, especially at the local level, just to try to involve more citizens, to organize some semi-institutionalized procedures, as for example, they are very popular, participatory budgets, or these mini publics, these citizen panels that now we are trying to develop at the regional or even national levels. And this is fine, this is very good. But I think in this moment also we need to go back and to look to the participation and involvement of citizens in a wider way. Why? Because what is important is, and this is a way of defining a concept that is used in a very different forms, I think what we have to defend is the deliberative character of our democracies. So we shouldn't define or just view democracies as a system where the citizens, they just elect some representatives for some years, and after they are very angry with what they do, and then, they can replace them, but not being involved on something else. When I start my classes with my students, they all agree that they say, well, there are no ways of participating, but when we really start to show all these possibilities, then there are a lot of forms of citizen participation. And citizens can be interested in participating in a specific moment, more involved, but at other times, what is very important is this general participation of the citizens through their involvement or their connection with public debate. What is being discussed in a society and in some moments. So I always insist, and this is very important, that we have what is participation in the institutions, and there are a lot of new changes and new mechanisms that they have invented. As I mentioned before, for example, we have this, what I call deliberative mechanism, but I'm going to insist that deliberation is everything, and I'm going to develop this idea a little bit more. But deliberative mechanism, as for example, recently on the conference on the future of Europe, they organized 4 European citizen panels, electing by lot some citizens to attend them and discussing there, some proposals to send to another committee composed by European politicians, some participants on other institutions of the European Union, the Social Committee, and many others. And this has been a way of stressing some forms of participation. But now, after we have tried this new mechanism, etc., I think, especially for the younger, this is very important to really take a look to the map and take a look to our democracies. And I'm going to insist that the characteristic element of democracies is that before taking any decisions, there is always a previous public debate. Public debate is what characterizes democracy. Of course, connected with the fact that the ones that are in governments are elected by elections. These are the two, I will say, the two core things. But sometimes we tend to forget about what we call these public debates that takes place, of course, within the institutions, but also in many other social spaces. This is very important. Public debate takes place, for example, is taking place in a seminar that is going to be published online, and speaking about some problems or some topics as today's seminar. This is a way of participating in the public sphere. Also, when you organize some conferences open to the public in general, in a room or in a theater, or when you are doing some meetings, etc. All of this is a way of participating in public debate. This is important to insist on, because, as I say, there are a lot of ways of being involved collectively. And this is very important, and I can comment some things of the Spanish politics later on, if it is okay in the debate, because we have just have a problem with our prime minister, and he was having being very, very, I would say, aggressive with some media and the way some journalists are presenting the Spanish politics and these things. But precisely journalists and the media has a special position, a special goal. This is very important in democracy. That is, they help to articulate in a way, and they help to give visibility to this public debate that is fragmented in, debates at the university, civil society, demonstrators in the streets, etc. So the role of the media is more and more important, always had been, but now in our societies that are becoming very, very, very complex, the role is even more important. And we have to be aware that all these media, the journalists, they have a special role for the functioning of democracy. And this is what, in our opinion, and this is in our project, what is being challenging in a way. And that's why in our project, we are focusing especially also on how from the governments, the regulators should intervene to really guarantee that this special role of the media in general, the journalists, these mediators of public opinion are doing the role that they have in this society, complex society. So we have, in one side, this public sphere, in the other, the institutions. But what characterizes deliberation in our democracies is that there are some connections between them. So when governments, they don't listen at all what is happening in the public sphere, this is not a good quality democratic government. The democracy has not good quality. This is important to acknowledge. But at the same time, you can have demonstrators, you can have part. This is important. There is not just one public opinion based on consent or based on just an homogeneous view of the things. But these public opinions that are aggregated from all these differences that we have in society, and from these public debates, they have to, in a way, influence what is decided in the institutions. So we understand deliberation in this systemic way, that democracy works well when there is this mess that affects the public sphere. At the same time, we are able to make a definition of, and this is very important, a very important point in our democracies, that we are able to see the pros and cons, the arguments of the ones that defend one point and the other that defends the other, to see the differences. And this is even more important in a society when we are speaking about post-truth context or post-truth condition, that these points of view are based and are supported by really good reasons and good knowledge. This is key for the functioning of democracy. But in practice, it's not so easy to write exactly the line where we just can accept something as, based in good reasons, based in a good knowledge, and what is like a kind of not supported at all, positions, informations, and arguments in favor or against other things. But this is important. Deliberation is first about to have the different point of views involved in the debates, in what has to be debated in the public sphere, listening and thinking in a critical way. What are the best arguments? What is against a position? What is in favor of another? Which is the evidences and the information, the knowledge available that supports one of the others. Why is especially important today? Because in our democracies, we tend to dismiss also and to be suspicious of some knowledge that comes from the institutions, and also because thanks to the new digital developments, people are exposed to a kind of accumulation of information supported with some knowledge that we don't know where it comes from, etc. And so there is some confusion about, how can I really base my own preferences, my own point of views. Some people, the reaction is that they just concentrate on their own networks, the small networks, or is I would say, a very close family with a specific ideology and just trying to listen this information as a kind of intermediaries. Others, because they just want to listen the information that comes from, I would say, the political parties or a network of, associates that share the same concerns. But, and this is the main point in our project and in our view of democracy, is that it's very important to be exposed also to the arguments of the others. This is important for deliberation in a democracy. Maybe you continue to have the same point of view, but it's important as a public debate as such to be exposed to these different points of view and different arguments about the issues that are controversial or that are, are being debated, or that some issues that are claimed, by some specific groups, etc. So there are two elements that are key for the well-functioning of democracy and to guarantee deliberation from a systemic point of view, that is inclusion of the different points of view. This is very important. It's like this normative goals, the respect of pluralism, and then the exposition to these pro and contras, the different point of views as citizens. If you understand this and you see democracy through these lenses, then we have to think about what's the role of the citizens, which are the specific skills that us as a society should try to develop in these courses, in these activities. And this is very important because depending on how you see the role of the citizens, you can approach civic education through the very different lenses. We can change the slide. So when I started with civic education many decades ago, there was a debate that was, well, should we focus on teaching civic education through a specific courses? And if we approach democracy from the perspective we are defending, I don't think the skills needed for the citizens to really be competent and to have a good criteria to first decide about their own preferences and to participate on this systemic deliberation. I don't think we can just train them or develop them through a specific course, especially in the context, and we are going to insist on the importance on looking to all of this from this perspective of the post-truth condition. Because what we need to develop are, in general, some what we call these intellectual virtues. And critical thinking is something that should be developed through all the courses, all the education of the students, in the sense of appreciating what is, science, scientific knowledge, the difference between, I will say, is natural science, more hard science, and social sciences. This is important, but that this is something that should be incorporated also, being aware of the debates that are behind that. We don't have the instruments just to look at the reality and just to know about them. So always knowledge is mediated also through power relations, is something that is subjected to debate within the academic by the experts, but also has, and this is very important, a social repercussion. And then I think not just the experts should participate on that. And all these, I would say, intellectual virtues is something that, the students should learn through all the education that we have to continue doing our teaching in the universities through all this process. And it is something that we should also try to promote and defend in the public sphere, through also in these public debates. This is important. The second thing that now are stressed in the second point that are now stressed in these civic education courses, etc., is to promote this precisely this more scientific and digital literacy. That is very important also, but again, I think this is something that should be developed also through the different courses and through all the education, and not just adding a new course or something like this. This is important to understand better how science works, the role of science, and also to acquire some digital instruments, but not just having I don't know how many hours, but in a semester a kind of course like this. These are important things that are needed just to live in our complex societies more and more. And then the third point, that is where many of these courses focus, it has to be with an extra stress on democratic values, that we need to promote also through these courses. And here I think we can do more to stress some of these points through education, and especially to insist and to stress the importance as citizens to be involved, but to be involved and to participate through different ways. So we stress that to participate in elections, to have criteria, to demand information are important things. And we are trying to stress this before, for example, these European elections that we are going to have. Even if you don't understand very well about how the institutions work, etc., it doesn't matter. The important thing also is to be involved in these public debates and to have a personal criteria. But it's not, this criteria is not built just, as an individual in the private sphere, just studying at home or something like this, but is really being exposed to these debates and trying to follow them more deeply or in a more superficial way. But it's important also that our way of participating in elections to accept that. And this is what we are going to, I'm not going to develop that because this is what we are going to explain through our specific case, what is happening and why it's so important with this disinformation before the elections, why it's important to really be aware of the importance of the sources and the importance of really being exposed to more than, you know, just what your neighbor says or your friends, the group of friends of WhatsApp, etc. These things. And of course, what is included now in all the civic courses is to develop participatory skills. But as I say, participatory skills are a very wide thing, and you can participate in many different ways. Some of them are related to what the other elements, intellectual virtues, digital literacy, and others you can learn them when you get more involved. For example, if you decide to belong to an association, or if you decide to be involved in one of these participatory instruments developed by the institutions or mechanisms, etc. But there are general things that are very basic and that allowed the citizens to be involved. And of course, a basic knowledge of all of this holistic view of how democracy is important and which are the spaces that it offers. This is one of the main things. And sometimes citizens don't like that, but at the same time, they are training them on a deliberative procedure to participate in a very specific deliberative forum or something like this. So I insist our goal is with this project and this activity is really to think on how important is to participate, as I say, in different levels with different involvements in this public debate, but also to think on, in the present condition, what is important to change, what is important to have, to really have this possibility of critically being engaged in and participate in this public debate without being manipulated by these new technologies or by some groups that are hidden there and nobody knows, or just by, you know, a kind of misunderstanding about what political participation means. So I'm going to start to finish with this more theoretical part, but we can go back and we will go back through our comments in the second part. And then I think we can say something else about this post-truth context. So Taru, you can continue with this.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So before we go to the practical advice or activity, we just want to summarize here just what Elena was saying, that it is important to stress that under these conditions of post-truth politics, what is happening is that democracy really is challenged. Really, it is an existential threat to democracy if citizens are not exposed to other opinions, other viewpoints, other perspectives, creating these separations, these kind of segregations of citizen opinions, that you have groups of citizens that are only thinking alike, that do not get exposure to other viewpoints. For instance, you have citizens who are leftist and they don't want to even consider viewpoints coming from the right wing. So this is problematic. This is even more problematic in this post-truth context, because there are deep problems, structural issues here, especially with social media, promoting these kinds of separated bubbles for people. So you sort of have very convenient truths that are not challenged, and this can be a real threat, and this is really our key message, that this can have serious consequences if citizens are merely the receivers of certain type of information, certain ideology. Of course, it is okay to have ideological commitments. That's not the issue. But when you are having a public debate, public discussion, you should, like Elena said, there should be pluralism, there should be pros and cons. And this is something that we want with this practical activity to sort of like show how you can engage different types of citizens without having to deal with certain formalities or so on, but just to have that perspective to civic education, that it can be very informal. It can even help to promote democracy, that you have these debates, these public debates. They can be very informal. They can be just like our webinar here. It can be anything to just have different points of view that are being explored and reflected upon in public. So this is really the systemic view that Elena was talking about, that we have institutions who react to public debates. They react to voices coming from the public sphere. And if you have just one voice that is sort of overtaking the public debates, that can be very problematic for democracy. And in the next slide, I will explain a little bit more about this. So what can be the potential implications? So here we have, of course, this is very familiar to many, the Brexit referendum campaigns. So as we probably all are aware, before the Brexit referendum in 2016, there was this huge amount of electoral disinformation. There was talk about immigration flows that are sort of like bringing the UK to a breaking point, and this was because the EU had failed the UK and its citizens. So if we go back to 2016, before the referendum, you probably remember that there wasn't huge public debate about the EU. What were the benefits of the EU membership for British citizens, or what were it was more concentrated on the threats, on the disinformation campaigns launched by Nigel Farage and his companions. So of course, now we know that there was this big scandal with Cambridge Analytica. So there was this algorithm being changed in the social media to promote this disinformation flow, and this kind of overwhelming bombarding of this kind of these threats, these taking advantage of this narrative overflows. It finally succeeded with the Brexit campaign. So you can see with the Brexit campaign there being also foreign influence, because there was afterwards they discovered that Russia had part in this campaign, and also you had the influence of the media. So how the media played along in this electoral disinformation tactics. So what we have to stress is that with civic skills and with public debate, you can foster giving people criteria. The public debates, they foster developing understandings of the situation. They can provide an understanding of the other side, the other viewpoints, the benefits of the EU, for instance. So if there would have been a bigger public debate of the pros and cons of the Brexit, there would have been people involved about this different criteria for these reliable sources of information. So just to summarize, this is a great example, this Brexit campaign, of this political pluralism in public debates, and it can really you can see how this Brexit situation could have been handled in a different way if there would have been a situation where citizens would have been exposed to different views to generate the best possible information to make decision on how to vote in this election. So from here, we will now go to the next slide, and I just briefly tell you a little bit what we are going to do next. So the activity we are going to do in the next minutes is to reflect these issues that we were talking about in the context of EU regulation of combating disinformation. So we focus on the European elections that are coming up and how disinformation is tackled by this new regulation in European Union. So we try to see the pros and cons of this issue. So it's a kind of an exercise of citizen participation itself. So very just a brief case study to show you a method how to do this. So in the next slide, I will give the floor to my colleague, Bouza, who will conduct this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Taru. And hello, everyone. I'm Bouza. Nice to say hello from Madrid. So, as Taru just introduced, and before we move on, this is just one part of the EU response to the ongoing conversation and discussion about post-truth politics. And it is just one part of one part. What do I mean by that? That the EU has responded to the ongoing concerns about manipulation of public opinion, manipulation of public conversations with regulation. Now, of course, if we are here is because we all think that regulation is not the only issue, that, for instance, something which is very important to tackle disinformation and information manipulation is, for instance, well, civic education, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, but you probably all know that the EU has relatively little competencies in the field of civic education, digital or media alphabetization, and so on. So the EU has been more active on the side of regulation, and has acted on regulation at several levels, mainly with the regulation of social platforms, but the EU also acted on the regulation of electoral advertisements, right? It has introduced common regulation, sort of minimum regulation that applies to transnational campaigns like the incoming EU elections, but also national campaigns. So some of these rules will apply at the national level. So basically the EU is having a say in how campaigns are regulated. So what we decided to do is focus on this because we have EU elections coming very soon, because the EU is going to start having an impact in how campaigns and advertisements are run in the different member states. So what we have chosen to do is give you a borderline case. It is an example of a video that was published in YouTube in Spain in 2021. So I'm not going to say anything else on the video. I want you to watch it, and I want you to watch it with the following question in mind: is, do you think this video has any kind of political problems? Does it raise any questions to you in relation to the issues of disinformation, information manipulation, and so on? And then we can open the discussion, and I will be telling you to what extent is this an example of what the EU is trying to combat. So maybe, Taru, if you can screen the video.
A mediados de marzo del año 2020 se decretó en España el estado de alarma bajo la crisis y emergencia sanitaria del COVID-19. Este vídeo no es para todos, sino para unos pocos, los mismos que no habéis parado de pedirnos cosas desde entonces. Nos pedisteis que nos quedáramos en casa y lo hicimos. Nos pedisteis que nos pusiéramos una mascarilla con su valor añadido y lo hicimos. Nos pedisteis que cerráramos nuestros negocios y lo hicimos. Nos pedisteis como docentes que educáramos a las futuras generaciones vía online, sin ayuda de nadie, y lo hicimos. Nos pedisteis como sanitarios que dobláramos nuestros turnos con una bolsa de basura como protección, y lo hicimos. Nos pedisteis como empresarios que enviáramos a miles de personas al ERTE, y lo hicimos. Y lo hicimos porque sabíamos que era lo mejor para nosotros. Pero llegados a este punto, es el momento en el que nosotros os tenemos que pedir algo a vosotros. Os pedimos que no subáis la luz en plena ola de frío. Os pedimos que no aumentéis la cuota de los autónomos cuando llevan meses sin poder trabajar. Os pedimos que no paralicéis el 20% del presupuesto en investigación pública porque nos seguimos muriendo de cáncer. Os pedimos que blindéis los contratos de las personas que estuvieron en primera línea de batalla, que apreciéis el arte y la cultura de este país, que entendáis que la hostelería es importante para todos. Os pedimos que no subáis el sueldo cuando España se muere. Os pedimos algo muy sencillo. Os pedimos respeto, dignidad y honor. Porque si algo hemos dejado claro durante este año es que España está muy por encima de vosotros. Y ahora nos pedís que votemos. ¿A quién? ¿A cuál? Está claro que España necesita un capitán para un barco que va a la deriva, pero no está entre vosotros. No os olvidéis una cosa. Somos 47 millones de españoles y vosotros solo unos pocos. Ah, hola, 2021.
Okay, thanks a lot, Taru. So, of course, the question is not whether you agree with this lady or not, or whether you like what she says or not, is what kind of political conversation do you think it is promoting? So I think maybe how to address specific groups. Now, of course, this also has a pro and con that we'll discuss later on. So if you can move to the next slide, and of course, feel free to run me at any point if you came up with any other reflections on the video. But basically, the regulation includes a third dimension, which is you need to create platforms, big social media platforms need to create repositories. Now, this is very important because, and that's part of the anecdote, when we were preparing this activity, it took me very long to find this video. And actually, we found that most political advertisements done online are eliminated after a few months by the political parties. So we gave you this link. that you can use to go to the Google Transparency Library. And that's basically where Google now stores all political advertisements that have been done in the European Union in the last times. And basically, if you Google for your favorite political party, you may find interesting information about all the advertisements that have been removed in the past. Right? So that's going to be a very valuable tool for research in the future. Now, to go back to the issue finally on the pros and cons, what have been the criticisms to these regulations? I don't know if anyone wants to anticipate the kind of critical problems that this regulation may lead to. What do you think the political discussion was about? Do you think this solves the issue of informational manipulation, for instance? Maybe we can cover those fairly quick. I'm there in the next slide. So one point of criticism was for civil society that the scope was excessive at the beginning. That basically the definition of political discourse was so broad that basically almost anything we could individually say during an individual campaign should be targeted as an ad. Now, that doesn't make sense to most of us, but that was the very broad definition. Basically, the idea that it doesn't matter if you are a professional political actor or not, the fact that you can, by your actions, influence a campaign is sufficient for you to be covered by the regulation. Now, this was solved during the policy-making discussion, and it's no longer there. This is why the regulation only covers professionally funded videos. Now, second point is why to single out political messages. That's the point I was making about targeting political messages, because if you read the regulation, it means that data that platforms collect about you to sell, I don't know, trousers or boots can be used to say you your favorite kind of trousers, but not to sell you, there's a lot of inverted commas in there, not to sell you your favorite political party. Now, we may discuss whether this is a good or bad idea, but it's about singling out politics as a particularly problematic or almost dangerous product, right? So here we are seeing that the rules of the game are not the same for political ideas as for other marketing issues. The rule of law critics have also pointed out that this is a very soft approach, in the sense that you're regulating only one very specific approach and one very specific activity of political parties, which is campaigning, but it still doesn't have any regulation on political parties. Now, the issue is, yes, we are going to try and avoid, I don't know, Mr. Orban's influence on elections through transparency of political advertisements, but still he may have many more resources than the opposition because of how political parties are regulated in Hungary, right? That's we are regulating a very specific issue rather than the broader point. And finally, that still, paradoxically, political parties cannot campaign outside their country, right? It has regulated political advertisement, but still European socialists cannot campaign in, Spanish socialists cannot campaign in Hungary, or they cannot make a loan to their Hungarian comrades if they want. That's still not the case in the EU. So there's been some Europeanization of regulation, but only a partial one. So we are seeing the embryo of regulation, but only the initial one. And my last point in the final slide is what does this tell us about the understanding of post-truth politics in the European Union, right? Because I think there's a clear attempt to protect public spaces, not to regulate the content of the ad, and it is about giving individuals the ability to customize their political exposure. Right? You can choose what political parties will know about you to choose if you want to be profiled or not. And they use promoting transparency as a tool. Right? Now, my real question is, to what extent is this contributing to a genuine political debate at the EU level? Right? Because transparency demands an effort. I mean, if you see something that looks fishy, that you disagree with, you can scan the advertisement with your telephone and you can find out more about who is behind. But how many citizens are actually doing that in the end of the day, right? Because this is assuming a certain model of the citizen who wants to individually be involved in finding out more information for the sake of protecting the public sphere, but it is not necessarily contributing to us seeing better advertisements and having better political debates, right? So I think this is something that we must be aware of, that the European Union has chosen this relatively individualized response and more, I would say, procedural approach to fight against disinformation. So that's where I